ready to embark on a journey.
Join us as we delve into the essence of the Philippine judicial system.
This is Beyond Gavel and Robe, unveiling the enigma of Philippine courts.
Objection, Your Honor.
Proceed, Attorney Bian. Humingi ka ng tawad dahil walang karapatan na makatulad mong retarded na magmahal. Order in the court!
Jai, have you ever wondered about the nature of Philippine courts?
Yes, well, it is based on Section 1, Article 8 of the 1987 Philippine Constitution.
Well, I'm curious about how it all works.
Section 1, Article 8 of the 1987 Philippine Constitution states that the judicial power shall be vested in one Supreme Court and in such lower courts as may be established by law. Judicial power includes the duty of the courts of justice to settle actual controversies involving rights which are legally demandable and enforceable, and to determine whether or not there has been a grave abuse of discretion amounting to lack or excess of jurisdiction on the part of any branch or instrumentality of the government.
So, this means that the court has the authority to settle legal disputes and uphold the rule of law. The courts play a crucial role in upholding justice and ensuring that the government acts within the bounds of the law.
As we continue, we are going to tackle the top 5 that we need to know about the nature of the Philippine courts. Well, the courts play a crucial role in upholding justice and ensuring the government acts within the bounds of law. So, does that mean the court and judge are the same?
They are different. Court is a tribunal clause with the power and authority to entertain and resolve legal disputes between the parties to carry out the dispensing of justice in accordance with the law. While a judge is a public officer who exercises the power of the court in dispensing justice. You also need to note that a court can function without a judge, but a judge cannot function without a court.
Moreover, there is a difference between a judge and a justice. A judge sits in lower courts, like the regional trial courts and the municipal trial courts, while a justice sits in collegial courts, like the Supreme Court and the Court of Appeals.
Well then, a court is a tribunal officially assembled under authority of law with a personality separate and distinct from the judge. It is an office and its existence is continuous, that its proceeding will remain effective despite the death, resignation, or cessation from the service of the judge. On the other hand, a judge is the person or officer who presides over a court. So a judge is a physical person and its power only lasts as he continues to occupy the office.
Exactly. You must take note also that in Rule 65 of Rules of Court,
both a judge and a court may be the respondents in a petition for certiorari prohibition and mandamus, where there is a determination of whether the actions are without or in excess of its or his jurisdiction, or with the grave abuse of discretion amounting to lack or excess of jurisdiction, and there is no appeal or any other plain, speedy, and adequate remedy in the ordinary course of law. And did you know that a long time ago, judges of the Supreme Court and the Court of First Instance were called judges, but now judges of the Supreme Court are called justices.
in addition to that, there are 2 types of court: constitutional court and statutory court. But hey, don't get confused. Supreme Court is the only court established by the Constitution. All lower courts are courts that is established by legislation into law.
So that is our top 5. The classification of Philippine statutory courts are courts of original jurisdiction, appellate courts, general jurisdiction, and special jurisdiction.
I am familiar with the courts of original jurisdiction. Courts of original jurisdiction are courts where a case is commenced. They take judicial cognizance of a case instituted for judicial action for the first time under the conditions set by the law.
You must remember that the courts of original jurisdiction is exercised by courts in the first instance.
What are the courts with original jurisdiction?
It depends on what type of action. If we say small claims or summary procedure, the original jurisdiction is the MTC. Whereas if it's petition for the issuance of your writ of kalikasan, the original jurisdiction belongs to the Supreme Court or with any stations of the Court of Appeals. If we say petition for the annulment of the MTC judgment, of course, the original jurisdiction belongs to the RTC. So again, original jurisdiction depends on the nature of the action.
How about the Court of Appellate Jurisdiction?
Courts of appellate jurisdiction are courts with the power to review on appeal the decisions or decisions of the lower courts.
So, the MTC does not have appellate jurisdiction?
You are right. MTC does not have an appellate jurisdiction because this is where cases commence for the first time.
The regional trial court serves as an appellate court for decisions made by the MTCs. Meanwhile, the Court of Appeals and the Supreme Court function as appellate courts for appeals from the regional trial courts. Additionally, the Supreme Court hears appeals from the regional trial court or the Court of Appeals. Do you have any idea what the courts of general jurisdiction are?
Courts of general jurisdiction are courts with the competence to decide in their own jurisdiction and to take cognizance of all cases, civil and criminal, except those expressly withheld from them either by the rules or by the law.
What about the courts with general jurisdiction?
Usually, it is the regional trial court. Under Batas Pambansa bilang 129, the RTC has jurisdiction over all cases not within the jurisdiction of any court tribunal person or body. So that is the general jurisdiction of the regional trial court.
Absolutely. Special or limited jurisdiction are courts whose jurisdiction extends only to a particular or specified case or cases, just like Sandigan Bayan, family courts, and the special commercial courts.
Criminal and civil cases involving graft and corrupt practices and other offenses committed by public officers and employees, including those in government-owned and controlled corporations, fall under the jurisdiction of Sandigan Bayan.
In Orsua versus Republic of the Philippines, the issue was whether the Sandigan Bayan had jurisdiction over the coconut levy laws. The ruling clarifies that both criminal cases are essentially about ill-gotten wealth. They involve the recovery of sequestered shares, property, or business enterprises which are claimed to be ill-gotten assets of former President Marcos, his cronies, and nominees. These assets were allegedly acquired through the exploitation of relationships or influence and/or through improper use, conversion, or diversion of government funds or property. The recovery of these assets considered prima facie ill-gotten falls, unquestionably within the jurisdiction of the Sandigan Bayan. You have to note that the Sandigan Bayan is only constitutionally mandated court. Presidential Decree number 1486 supported the creation of Sandigan Bayan as provided under the 1973 Constitution. Presidential Decree number 1606 revised Presidential Decree 1486 elevating the Sandigan Bayan to the same level as the Court of Appeals. All courts in the Philippines except the Supreme Court are statutory courts. They are creations of statutes as statutory courts. They may be abolished by Congress by amending or repealing the law which created these courts.
court of law decides a case according to the existing laws or the laws of the land, whereas a court of equity decides according to the precepts of equity or justice and is sometimes called a court of conscience. It adjudicates a controversy according to the common precepts of what is right and just, without inquiring into the terms of the statutes. Under the system of procedure obtained in the Philippines, both legal and equitable relief is dispensed in the same tribunal as our courts are both courts of law and equity. They are not powerless. Powerless to determine a factual matter in accordance with both standards. However, when we say equity, it means fairness.
In Santos versus De Leon, the doctrine proceeds on the familiar rule that the writ of injunction is an equitable relief, and that the determination of title is a legal remedy. In jurisdictions where courts of equity are separate and distinct from courts of law, such distinction is by no means a matter of indifference. Indeed, it is a matter of jurisdiction, for courts of equity, by their nature, can only administer equity. Thus, following this principle, this court has further held that where the defendant raised the question of title, injunction is not the proper remedy. It is once clear, however, that where, as in jurisdiction, courts are not divided into that of equity and of law, but are vested with the power to administer both law and equity, such jurisdictional question is out of place.
So in the case of Reyes versus Lim, the purpose of the exercise of equity jurisdiction is to make things fair. Regular courts can't always handle unique situations, so equity jurisdiction exists to provide more flexible solutions. This can involve preventing someone from unfairly profiting and ensuring things are set right. The application of equity always involves a balancing of the equities in a particular case, a matter addressed to the sound discretion of the court. A court of equity will not rescind a contract unless there is restitution. That is, the parties are restored to the status quo ante. In the case of Cedeno versus People, the court has the authority to make an exception to a rule in a specific case, if it believes it is necessary to achieve fairness and justice. The court considers several factors before making an exception. These factors are: number 1, whether there are exceptional circumstances in the case. Number 2, the merits of the case. Number 3, whether the party asking for the exception is not entirely at fault for the situation. Number 4, whether the request is not simply a delay tactic. And lastly, number 5, whether the other party will be unfairly harmed by the exception.
Just remember, equity is not to be applied when there is a law applicable. The judge should not decline to render judgment or decision because of insufficiency of the law. But if the law is clear as to what the law is, then there is no question.
That is an amazing and profound explanation about our top 3. Now let's go to our top 2.
In G.S. Summer versus DOT, the doctrine of hierarchy of courts dictates that direct recourse to this court is allowed only to resolve questions of law, notwithstanding the invocation of paramount or transcendental importance of the action. This doctrine is not mere policy. Rather, it is constitutional filtering mechanisms designed to enable the court to focus on the more fundamental and essential task assigned to it by the highest law of the land. Moreover, In Kausing versus People of the Philippines, the Supreme Court's decision clarified the elements of a specific crime and highlighted the importance of adhering to legal precedents set by higher courts. This demonstrates how lower courts are bound by the decisions of higher courts, ensuring the consistency and uniformity in legal interpretations. Similarly, in Bakirin versus De La Rosa, the Supreme Court's decisions reaffirmed the significance of following legal precedents and the hierarchy of courts. The resolution of these cases underscores the authority of higher courts in interpreting and applying the law, guiding lower courts in their decision-making processes. Now, let us go to our top 1.
In the case of Manialac versus Galiada, the doctrine of judicial stability or non-interference in the regular orders or judgments of a co-equal court is the basic principle that prevents courts with similar authority from messing with each other's decision. Through injunctions, the rationale for the rule is founded on the concept of jurisdiction. Once a court takes a case and makes a decision, that court is in charge of enforcing it and handling any related issues. Other courts of equal standing can't step in and mess with things. This keeps the system orderly and avoids conflict ruling.
This is Beyond Gavel and Robe, unveiling the enigma of Philippine courts.